This is one of the tools that I used to use for screening, right? So um, sometimes I helped a company like hire the like new candidates in the past. So this is a tool we sort of reused. Um, there are all kinds of tools, but they all look similar, right? They have a Kanban board, so they connect to different kind of data sources like Indeed, LinkedIn. So all the applications come here. So these are all the applicants, right? And you move people through different stages. So some people, after you look at the resume and then it got disqualified right away. There are some people that you're looking for more feedback, and sometimes they're like missing information, but the profile looks interesting. So HR might be contacting them first to collect some extra feedback before the program hiring manager talk to them, right? And then you move people through interview, offer, different stages. Okay, and this is this shows details, right? There's the resume section, right? Experience. Now, this is done by those automated tools, right? And it was trying to cover parse cover letter, but in this case, there's no cover letter. So it's like just a default message. So this pretty much means this person doesn't have a cover letter. To me, cover letter is not very useful because people rarely have time to read it. Most of the cover letter is pretty long. So I don't find it very useful because I'm just like interested in the resume keywords and the project. That's it. Like unless there's like a reason, but I don't know this candidate. I can't find a reason for me to read cover letter because I just don't have enough time. But sometimes when you actually look at the resume and you found this person interesting, and then it looks like, for example, for Peter, and this person has an MBA background, but he's looking for a data engineer job, right? I might be interested in checking out the cover letter, but yeah, if you don't have a cover letter, it's totally fine. That's what I'm saying. Your
It's funny
mentor
you
might
mentioned that because when I
as
was
a
a hiring manager, I hated cover letters.
yeah,
Because like you said, there's no time to read them, and they all sound the
yeah, you
same.
just don't have time to read it. That's true. Yeah. Your mentor might think otherwise, but I think most of the time people I know some companies, what if you apply for the job on their company's website directly, they'll ask for cover letter, but I think it's optional. It should not be mandatory, I
I
think.
use Chat GPT to write mine.
Yeah, it's getting popular. Yeah.
What is that? I'm not familiar with it.
Oh, search Chat GPT. It's a
Okay.
project done by OpenAI. It's pretty freaking scary, I would say.
ChatGPT.
'Cause
It's an
like,
AI chat bot
yeah.
that you can ask to do basically whatever you want, like write you a cover
Write
letter.
code as well. Like you
Yeah,
say, can you write like whatever, Python program
I've
to
heard about that. I haven't heard
yeah.
ChatGPT though. All right, interesting. All right. Funny.
Yeah, but it's quite expensive to run Chat GPT. Yeah. But it's definitely going to be the future. Yeah. So imagine like these tools can actually automate a lot of the low level stuff, just like the connectors. I think with all of these connectors, like it just doesn't make sense for you to write your own. Like connectors ideally use Airbyte, which is open source, because it's very repetitive. Like, do you want to write it yourself or just use a connector written by somebody else? If it saves time, then just use it, right? And of course, you want to go for like a connector or project that's has more stars on GitHub, right? That means more support and things like that. You really have to build your own connectors. But again, like the business logic, even if it's collecting the same data from the same source for different companies, like for example, WeCloudData has a sales process. That sales funnel looks very different from a different company, even though we're using the same tool. In the HubSpot backend data structure and the different tables and entity relationships are all the same, but the process is different. The way you write queries will be different. That part is a little bit harder to automate, right? So I think this is where data engineers can offer a lot of value, and also just deciding what tool to use to meet all the constraints. So there are many different ways to do things. You're just like keep optimizing things, but you're also like every day you're building technical debt as well, I guess. Okay. So resume, interestingly, no matter how like fancy your your resume, like how you style it or you structure it, but like if you go through this kind of automated, screening tool, it just like extract the standard stuff. Like as a hiring manager, I'm seeing exactly the same template, so I don't even get to see your fancy formatting. Okay, unless I click on the attachment. But I mean, if I have it here, I'm definitely not gonna click on attachment. I just don't have the time, to be honest, because if you look at this, this dashboard here, there's so many. I think I had to go through like, this is 140, 50 resumes. Like I really don't have time to go through each one of them. But of course, I'm doing a screening. That's why I'm like really going through this really quickly as a typical recruiter, right? Whether it's external or internal. But I think when the resumes go, like when the hiring managers start to work with the resume, it's probably just a bunch of them, like maybe 20 of them or even less. They may have more time, to be honest, but this is the initial screening. The template is pretty much the same. And so that's why sometimes people suggest that don't make your resume structure too complicated. So it's become a little bit harder to parse and they miss something, for example, additional information. It's missing here probably because the person doesn't have it, but sometimes they may miss some key skills if your structure is too complex. Okay, the resume. Yeah, so that's a typical process. Now, this candidate, I think this slide, I was just trying to highlight the importance of a portfolio. So this applicant has, a couple of projects, right? But right away, my attention was here. Like I'm just looking for someone who has relevant experience, and he was the co-operators of an insurance company, but but apparently it wasn't like data analytics related, right? So I'm almost gonna pass. I said, okay, not interested, right? And then I just looked up and said, oh, there's some links here. It's definitely going to be projects. I clicked on one of them and I saw this, and I was blown away because he not only apparently this is more like a customized website, and he was trying to predict some sort of score, but he not only built the models, and he also deployed that to and display that in a very small application. That was impressive. To me, that shows effort, because instead of just a GitHub, right, he has a small website, he has resumes, he has the predictions of the game, whatever game results, and using the models he built, right? So this is a lot of effort, and I think this is very helpful, and I would definitely want to give him an interview, right? Yeah. So, another point on the certifications, right? So I found this on just on LinkedIn. I was just trying to prove a point, but having too many certifications is not really helpful, right? I know like access to informations and courses are very easy nowadays, and it can, I'm usually worried about someone who has done 30 different courses. I feel like the time is all just like, because where do you find that time to do like 20, 30 different courses online? And being able to learn things, that learning aptitude is great, right? But I'd rather someone who's just did like 3, 4 courses, but I'm looking for proof, right? So when you tell me that you have Apache Spark experience in your key skills or SQL, I want that keyword to show up, in your project or in your past work experience. And I find that a lot of people make mistakes, like they have so many keywords, but they mention very few of them in the actual project they did. So I can't see the proof. So that's not very helpful. And then in that case, like if you tell me that you have 30 courses you've completed, I feel like you're just like doing it for the sake of doing it. You don't really have real experience. That's kind of alarming to me sometimes. But I'm not saying that like doing courses is not good. But when I see like too many courses, sometimes it scares me. Like, where do you find that much time? I'm looking for a thing like, have you actually built something? That's more important, right? And data engineering is very practical. it is okay to know less tools, but I want you to have applied all of these skills and tools you mentioned in your resume on some sort of projects, and I'll have more confidence, because it's, you know, because we're always going to make bad hiring decisions, because, you know, it's not guaranteed that, like, even if you're experienced hiring manager, it's not guaranteed that you're always going to find the best candidate. But then interview is all about, like, just, can we, like, it's like controlling the risk here. You know, you want to find someone who's really good, but you also want to make less mistakes, because hiring mistakes can be very costly. I can go with someone who's like a little bit less skilled, but if this is just the right candidate, I have lower risk, it might be good. You know, we're not like, not every companies are like Facebook and Google, right? Because if you know, hiring someone is like 1 to 2 months at least. That's the process, and you have to train that person for a month or two, or at least get familiar with, you know, your company's product and systems and stuff. And then you realize that this is not the right person, then you have to go through that process again. So a lot of companies or hiring managers want to lower that risk, and that's why showing your portfolio, showing that you've done something, you've completed a project, is very important, right? And some students will ask questions about, like, oh, you know, how many years of experience I need to have, because a lot of jobs ask for 3 to 5 years of experience. So the skills you've learned in this program, right? It usually, like, some of these, like Spark Streaming or like the lakehouse stuff, it usually requires someone who has 3 to 5 years of experience. Right? Even though you don't have 3 years of work experience, I think you should apply for that kind of jobs. A lot of students got, applicants got sort of, they're not confident enough to apply for a more intermediate or senior level jobs, because they think they're at the beginner level, or maybe they think they don't have enough experience. What I can tell you is that if the job asks for 2 to 3 years of experience, you should absolutely apply for it. And then if asked for 3 to 5 years, you can decide, like, is it going to be a waste of time? Because if they're looking for more like architect, you know, very like senior experience, then, you know, maybe it's, you know, to just don't waste your time. But I would say, like, half the time you should also apply for it. And I'll tell you one reason. So I think one of your TAs or instructors are, how come I forgot the name of our instructors? Sorry. But okay, I'll tell you the story here, right? So one of your instructors graduated from our boot camp, but that was 4 or 5 years ago. And maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So we referred him to Talos, right? And the Talos recruiter told me specifically that we're looking for someone who's more senior, ideally 5 to 7 years of experience. And I referred this, you know, the student to them, because I felt like he was the best candidate we have at that time, right? So I was just trying, and he built really awesome portfolio, and it was like an end-to-end project. Everything is built on AWS. He had some recommender systems and a lot of data engineering stuff. He deployed Flask apps, you know, so it was very impressive. And he actually only had like less than 1 year of experience, work experience, and it's not even data engineering and data science. And I think he has a mechanical engineering background. So the work experience is totally irrelevant, basically. But he actually got the interview. And then later on, they give me the feedback saying this candidate was really good. He's like 10 out of 10 on technical. It was Zhang, right? It was Zhang, your TA and instructor. And then, but he made all the way till the end. But he didn't get, of course, he didn't land the job because he was interviewed by 2 directors from the business side. And unfortunately, he didn't have enough work experience, and also not the business sense, so he didn't get the job. But the point here is that, like, they told me they need 7 years of experience, but they still give him an interview, and they were impressed, right? And also, another example I want to give you is that the market for data engineering is very different right now, right? One of my neighbors is the director of data engineering team at RBC. He managed a pretty big team, right? And he's telling me that they lost a lot of senior people during COVID, And he said that was the time that a lot of US tech companies opened up like offices, remote offices. A lot of their senior talents actually ended up working for the big tech companies remotely. So and then they have to hire people, and then they realize that the people they want, they just like, there's not enough of them, a good candidate in the job market. Um, and then sometimes he said, okay, I found a really good candidate, right? But this, like, if it's someone that good, and he got multiple offers, and they also don't go with RBC. So they actually had to like increase the base salary a lot, just to like try to hire someone, because the best talent nowadays, like some of them work for Facebook and Google, and you only get to pick the second tier, you know, candidate who are less experienced, right? So that gives us a lot of opportunities, because if you're one of those 200 applicants, right, the best candidate, right, may not even be actively looking for jobs, right? And then and there's some like strong candidates, they might be too expensive to hire, because hiring decision, right, it's an optimization problem as well. I have budget constraint as hiring manager. I want to hire really quickly sometimes. So that means I don't have enough time to look for the right candidate, right? And or the person who I really want, I just don't have the budget, right? Um, and it ended up being like people are willing to hire a lot of the junior data engineers just who have the right skills, and they still have a lot of bargaining power. There's a time window here. Like, I don't know how long this is going to last, but I would say at least a few years, like data engineers will be in good demand. So, you know, my point here is that if it's a job asking for 3 to 5 years of experience, ask for like 3 to 5 years of experience, you should just apply for it, because you may have a very good chance, because they're like 70% of the job applicants, they don't even have the right skills, to be honest. We are hiring machine learning engineers right now, right? And you know, I've looked at a lot of resumes, like a lot of them are honestly not as good as our like machine learning engineering bootcamp student, because you know, a lot of people are interested in applying, but you know, you can always like very easily tell, like quickly tell that they're just not the right candidate, right? And a good candidate, I know I cannot afford them, because they will be asking for a fortune, you know, the real machine learning engineers. So they always need to compromise. And sometimes job search is not finding the best candidate, you know, because the best candidate, even if like you can afford them, how long can you keep them? That's another challenge. Like 6 months later, they'll get a call from Facebook and they'll leave. So companies, that's why like companies are looking for the right fit. You know, I remember we referred a U of T graduate who did some like AI robotic projects like in his like undergrad study, and then I referred the student to Loblaws, and it's a data science team doing time series forecasting, and it was my friend who's working as a director, and he said, okay, this is a great candidate, but I don't think he will stay very long in this job, because we're just doing like time series forecasting, regression modeling, and a lot of business stuff. Like all of the project on his portfolio is like AI, deep learning. I don't think he's going to be that excited about the job. And he didn't even get an interview, even though he thinks he's good, right? So people are also looking for the right candidate, and sometimes it's hard to say what is right or what is not right. But I want to let you know that, you know, the reason why a lot of the previous students, even without the, you know, the relevant work experience, they can still get interviews and get a job. And so you should have more confidence for sure. Okay.
Hey, one question. What is the average pay now? Like, since it was like a hot job market for data engineers, do you have any idea?
Yeah, it's very wide. So we have
Okay.
students who got hired for as low as 70 grand. I haven't seen anything that's below that, but on the higher end, the students in the US, we have students who got hired for close to 160 thousand US dollar. And it's more commonly to see people in Canada getting paid around 90 to 100,000 as a data engineer. Yeah,
Thank you.
so it's somewhere between like, but I think in the previous cohort, we also have a student in the bank who got an offer for about 130,000 at RBC. But it was actually a senior data engineer job. Yeah, she comes from analytics background, but she's not a data scientist. She's also not a data engineer, but she works for a different bank. That might have helped as well. But yeah, she got a senior job. And at RBC, so my neighbor told me, the base salary for a data engineer at RBC is around 100,000, and a senior data engineer will be around 150,000, I think. Right, but if you work for a consulting company, it will be lower usually, so could be 90K, 100K. So it's quite common to see like data engineers get paid 100K or 90K. But as soon as you have like 2-3 years of experience, I wouldn't worry about the first job. Like the second job, usually you get a pretty big jump in salary. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a good question, because I got asked as a screening question yesterday for a data warehouse job, expected salary range, and it's hard to tell them I don't really care, I just want the experience.
Oh, please never ever tell people that. Like,
Yeah, I know.
you need to set expectation and tell people. Basically, you need to tell people I'm not cheap. You need to pay me decent. I think that's the right way to tell them. So yeah, I don't think it's people won't be. It depends. Like for example, like I have a lot of people I know. We also referred a couple of students to Sobeys, and they're doubling their team every year. I feel like they don't pay that much, even though it's a pretty big company. And I think Loblaws will probably pay better. But even different banks, the pay is quite different. Depending on like, because there are data engineers who work in the traditional ET, like the data ingestion or ETL like teams. They use like more traditional tools, but there are also data engineers who just work on a big data Spark and all the more modern technologies. The pay is actually quite different. Even in the same company, right? For startups, some startups can pay really well if they're well funded or they're profitable. They do want to compete for good talents, but there are also startups that are super cheap, like they just can't afford, like doesn't have the cash flow to pay people a lot. But I would say, yeah, the data engineer pay are definitely not bad. It's definitely really good and very competitive in the market. In some way, data engineers nowadays, at least in the next few years, you will get paid more than data scientists, because data scientists has been around for so many years. It's starting to get more specialized, right? So a couple of years ago, data scientist probably just means someone who knows pandas, Python, and who knows Apache Spark. Right. But today, data scientists, if you're just doing data analytics, that's more like a data analyst. So there's so much demand. Whenever you have more demand than the supply, then more supply than the demand, right? Then the price will drop. But for data engineer, it's kind of like the data science, right? A couple of years ago, there's not enough talent in the market, and that's why I think it's going to look good for data engineers in the next couple of years. But who knows? Things will get more automated, right? As I said, there are more click and drag type of data engineering platforms. I know there's one called, is it called Prophecy, right? It's called prophecy.io or prophecy.com. And they did they are basically the low code, no code data engineering tool built on top of Apache Spark. Basically, you just need to do like the click and drag, and it automatically generates Apache Spark jobs. And they claim to be even better than the average code Spark jobs written by regular data engineers. It sounds very promising, but I know a lot of companies will not use that kind of tool because you're pretty much locked in. And whenever you want to make changes, it's impossible. And you're working with the limitation of that tool. But I know a lot of companies will also adopt this kind of platform, right? So, yeah. Okay. Any other questions? I think I don't know how many slides I have left. Let me check. Oh, I still have a lot. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so I would like to. This is not very useful because I know you understand it already. Okay, this is what I would like to explain. I don't know how many of you guys are from US, but at least in Canada, recruiters are playing a very critical role, right, in job search. And you need to understand like how this works, right? Because I found that some students, if you know, they're probably new grad, so they don't have a lot of experience. They don't understand how staffing works, right? So let me explain to you. Let's say this slide was originally created for data science students, but it's pretty much the same for data engineers, right? So there are four different types of people in this ecosystem, right? It's a people business, right? So we have candidates, we have hiring managers, there's HR and staffing companies. Okay. Big companies like RBC, Loblaw Digital, or the big tech, they have pretty big HR team. So they have internal recruiters and they have also the sourcing team, right? So internal recruiters are different from the regular recruiters we see on LinkedIn, right? Those are the recruiters working for staffing companies, okay? But if you work for Facebook, sometimes I get a lot of people reaching out to me from like Facebook, right? And those are internal recruiters, right? They are full time with Facebook, right? So they're usually quite technical, to be honest, right? And they are doing all the screening. I found that this type of recruiters, they're more willing to build connections on LinkedIn. They'll like proactively reach out to candidates, and sometimes they'll even touch base with you and reach back in a couple of months. And I listened to one podcast a while back, right? It was a Facebook recruiter saying that if you're a new grad, you're looking to get into big tech, cold calling internal recruiters in big tech companies actually is very effective. So if you're interested in working for those companies, they always like talent, right? So it might be a shortcut. It's not going to guarantee your job, but just knowing how to build connections will be important, right? But that recruiter gives some small tip, right? And she said, like, there's so many people contacting me, and sometimes it's just like overwhelming. And so she said, like, what works for her, or like she said, like, sometimes like because those recruiters will post jobs and stuff, right? They sometimes post on updates on LinkedIn. Try to have some activities like a post or comment on something. So because they post something, they will definitely want to read the comments, right? You sort of leave comments a couple of times, so when she's going through those comments, the name will eventually ring a bell, right? They're more likely to accept your request when you connect with them. Okay. So I found that an interesting example. But anyways, sourcers. The sourcers, when the companies are big, right? They actually have a dedicated team just doing all the cold calling or building, partnerships, right? For example, HR team, like the sourcers reaching out to boot camps or universities, trying to build, they go to those hiring event, right? Whatever, and so I think the recruiters are more useful than the sourcers, right? Sourcers usually build, partnerships. So, but just keep in mind that, big companies will have dedicated HR and internal recruiters. And for some companies, they may actually work with a a staffing company, and that staffing company is using, let's say, RBC hiring a staffing company, and that staffing company is the employees, like the recruiters will actually have the RBC email, so it feels like they're internal recruiters. Okay. But of course, then there's the staffing company. When you do cold calling on LinkedIn, I think you should definitely try reaching out to recruiters or agencies or staffing companies, and just Google. Oh, sorry, just search, for let's say data, right? Plus recruiter, okay, and you should be able to find a list of people, recruiters, who has an associated like keyword such as data or data engineer, right? And cold call them, right? Just try to make a connection and have some sort of standard, self-introduction. And they're much more likely to accept your connection and show them your portfolio and see if we can start a conversation. Now, it takes a lot of patience and takes time. One suggestion I have is, sometimes I found some students are just like, they're very easily discouraged, right? They reached out to 5 people and they don't hear back. They feel like, oh, no one is interested in me. It's actually not how it works, because all of these people are busy and there's so many people wanting to talk with them and, connecting with them. It's quite common, like it's for people to ignore you, right? All you can do is just keep trying, and you only care about those people who respond to you, right? Forget about those 99 people who don't respond, because a lot of time it's not because of you, it's just because they're too busy, okay? Don't be too hard on yourself, like be patient and be more confident. When they reach back, and definitely try to have a conversation. And this is like, a great opportunity for you to test your resume to see if people have enough interest in you. If you tried many recruiters, they're not showing interest, and it tells you that there's something wrong with the resume or the project, or maybe your background, like, so, and then if we can identify the issues, we know how to improve it, right? The worst case is that you just don't know what's wrong, right? So you need this kind of feedback, and sometimes feedback is implicit. You apply for jobs, you don't hear back, then fix your resume. You reach out to people on LinkedIn and no one is, no feedback. And then you got to try something different, and you need to be more, there are tactics, right? And next time, change your self-introduction, message, try to include your GitHub link and see if people start to respond right? Respond to you. So you need to do this kind of experiment, and please be very patient, because it takes a little bit of time. For some people, it might be really fast, but for some students, it may take longer. But trust me, you're gonna get there, because you already have these skills. There's no way this market, this very bullish market is going to ignore the skills you have right now. But all you need to do is just like increase the chance of the right people hearing about you, right? That is an effort you need to make, okay? But when they actually start to respond to you and start to place you into some sort of roles, you need to understand how the dynamics work, right? So there are 2 different types of, there are many different types, but the 2 basic types, right, of staffing company, there's the recruiters who earn commissions, right? So whether they place you into a contract role or they place you into a full-time role, they take a cut, right, of your yearly salary. Let's say they place you into a company that pays you 100,000, right? They're probably earning 20,000. Like it's usually between 20 and 30%, right? And smaller agencies may charge less because they don't really have a lot of negotiation power. But if it's executive hire, then the commission can be like really high, right? Because it's harder to find executives. But typically, I would say 20% to 25%. So some students will say like, oh, do I need to pay the recruiter? No, you never pay the recruiter. You never sign any contract with any recruiter, right, before you get the job. So it's always going to be, you expect this service to be free, okay? So I think there was one time that a recruiter who was really like rushing the student to make a decision, because the student is also interviewing with another company. and they like want him to like basically sign a contract. I told him like never ever sign any contract because you can always work with as many recruiters as you want. Okay. And you don't have to pay them because the company pays you 100,000 and they get paid additional 20%. So that means the company wanted to pay 120,000 to hire you. The 20,000, 20% goes to recruiter. That's how it works, right? That's just the commission-based recruiting. I found that in data engineering, there are actually a lot of they're more relatively more like contracting jobs, right? Contractors. That's because a lot of data projects are like project based. Let's say the company wants to do, like, especially in banks, right? They are trying to migrate some systems to the cloud. And after the migration is done, they actually don't need the whole team. Right? You need a team of 10 people, including project managers, data engineers, software engineers, and QA. And after the project is done, like, you don't want to keep the team. And that's why in those big companies, there are like a lot of contracting opportunities, right? Those are usually like 1 year or 2 year contract, could be as short as 6 months or even 3 months. The big staffing companies, the way it works is that you sign contract directly with the staffing company. So you got hired by a pretty big staffing company, and that staffing company is going to charge, right, the client. So basically, let's say RBC is paying, let's say the staffing company $100 an hour, right, for a data engineer who's going to work on a contract for 1 year. So that's about 200,000. Okay, the cost. So what RBC is paying is $200,000 to that staffing company, and it's up to that staffing company how much they want to pay you. And of course, you can negotiate it, right? So the employer is actually the staffing company, and usually they require you to have some sort of company yourself, right? So in that case, if you're working in contract jobs, then you can pay less tax. For some people, like if the rate is really good, it's worth it to register your own company, and so you use your own company to sign a contract with the staffing company, right? And then there are a lot of expenses you can do. Okay. Yeah, so sometimes you're required to do that first. I think it's just $60 and you can register your own company. It's pretty easy. Okay. But just pay attention at this point, because they usually get paid 100 and even more, right, an hour. And a typical year is like 2,000 hours, so that's like 200,000. But they need a profit, so they are going to pay you less, right? So contracting jobs are hourly based, right? So when they negotiate a contract, it's probably going to be 60, 70, 80, 90. It's really like it really depends on how badly they need you and how much time and constraints they have, right? Because if they pay you 90, that means they're only making 10, so that means they're making less money, right? So some staffing company will maybe pay you 30, 40, 50. It really depends on how much negotiation power and how experienced you are, right? If they really want you and your experience, they're willing to pay you more, and because they need to present you to RBC, and RBC will still need to do the interview and do a final, make a final decision, right? But of course, you go through, the interview with the staffing company already. It's pretty much like if they've decided, you have really good chance of getting hired, right? So if you're really strong, you have experience, they don't have much negotiation power because they know you'll easily get a job elsewhere. But I found that sometimes, like with a junior hire, they tend to be more aggressive. They'll tell you like 40,000, $40 an hour, that's 80,000. You might be pretty happy, but you didn't really know that they were actually charging the client 150 an hour. Right? It's typical consulting, but it's pretty expensive to actually run a consulting and staffing company as well. But it's also profitable for sure. So anyways, I just want you to know how this works, so that when you know that you're actually dealing with a staffing company, try your very best to negotiate. Because some students, like especially the students who are coming from a non-tech background, they will be super happy to just get the first job. But regardless, you need to negotiate, because the fact that they're already giving you an offer, they want you, that's the time you're going to bargain, right? It's not always going to work, but you should at least try. Yeah, so hopefully this is helpful. And if you have any questions later, I can, your mentor should know all of these already, and you can ask us as well at that point, like salary negotiations and stuff like that. Okay. Any questions on this, or any comment? Because some of you may already have similar experience. Okay, we're almost at the end of this session. So one last thing I would like to talk about is just, as you go through, the interview process, and you need to do some networking. I think I mentioned cold calling on LinkedIn already, right? So, just a couple of tips, right? Don't get discouraged, right? People are usually busy, especially the people you want to reach out to, like hiring managers and recruiters, right? Things usually don't come free. Like, definitely don't. The worst way of connecting with someone is just like ask for a referral. Try to, I think using a portfolio and asking for feedback might be useful for a senior data engineer or hiring manager. With recruiters, just like be very straightforward, and here's my profile, and show the confidence, and they will definitely be interested in having a chat with you. Okay, at least a couple of back and forth, messaging on LinkedIn. But let's say your resume works out and you start to get interviews. One suggestion I have is research is very important. Like, you need to know who you will be dealing with, right? Sometimes you don't know who you will be talking to. One tip I would like to give is that when HR reach out to you, always ask questions. A lot of time I found that, like, when you say, hey, do you have any questions? People will say, I don't have any questions. But when you talk to HR, that's the best opportunity for you to ask all kinds of questions. It's their job to answer your questions, right? And if you ask questions, you show more, curiosity, and it also is a good sign from their perspective, because that means you care, right? HR, when I used to work as a, hiring manager, I have a dedicated recruiter, right? And also HR. So that means, like, I work with HR to decide, or the internal recruiter to decide, the profile, right? Because there's typically companies will have role profile, right? Let's say we have a role profile for data engineer, let's say, but of course we have the senior, we have the junior, different levels, right? But it sort of describes what this role needs to do, right? HR recruiters, they are not data engineers, so they rely on the hiring manager, right? But of course, the hiring manager can be really slow because they're busy. So that's why recruiters are going to, just go find similar job postings and tweak it. And that's why a lot of the job descriptions are super confusing, right? Because they copy and paste and they make some changes. So the hiring manager will say, this is the person I want to hire, and these are the must-have skills, right? And some nice to haves and things like that. But they don't really specialize in technology, right? So HR usually are just like, asking some very basic questions to make sure that to do very basic screening. You already passed some sort of automated screening, so that definitely means you hit the right keywords. But attitude, like, behavioral, they may ask you some behavioral question, or just clarify, like, are you legally able to work in Canada? Are you, or you're here on a traveling visa or whatever. They want to make sure that they do their due diligence, right? But that's the best time for you to ask questions. For example, if I may move on to the next round, who am I going to be talking with? You don't really need the name of the person, but you want to know, like, which manager will be working with, how big is the team, right? What is the typical performance review process like? You want to ask as many questions as possible. And And you can even ask like, oh, what are some of the most important tools and skills I need to have? It is totally okay to ask the HR person, right? And because they know a lot of things, and they might actually be willing to share with you. And it's just collecting these information that can help you, right, in the next round. So you know what the team, how big the team is. But of course, you need to ask the hiring manager, more relevant information, of course. Okay. And then when you move on to the next round, you're going to talk to the hiring manager and sometimes director. They will definitely tell you the name, right? So you can start doing your research. LinkedIn is definitely the place to start with, and just try to check out their profiles, right? This is just a random example. I just found someone on LinkedIn. And she's the director of custom analytics at Scotiabank, right? And it's important to check out their description. This is like how they describe themselves, right? And they have activities. So these are the things you need to look into, right? And you need to decide like how experienced and how technical this hiring manager is. There are hiring managers that are not that technical. It's totally possible. In Scotiabank, one of the enterprise, whatever, data engineering team, right? And she's a director now. And she's not technical at all, but she has great people skill. I think she's got an MBA and worked as a maybe data analyst at Bell Canada, and then she just like got promoted, got hired into Scotiabank, and is doing a lot of the hardcore data engineering stuff for Scotiabank, and she's doing really well, right? But she's not that technical, so she relies on her team. So in that case, you do want to know like if the hiring manager is technical, because in the interview that decides how much technical question she's going to ask you, right? So do your research and look into the activities. I'll show you some examples. So for example, here, I think this is some sort of activity feeds, and apparently she's sending her team to the Google Cloud Summit, right? That tells you that if they're not using Google Cloud, they're definitely evaluating Google Cloud, right? So I think this will be useful because maybe you have learned AWS in this program, but the Google Cloud is what they use. It doesn't mean you cannot get the job, right? You don't need to get Google Cloud certified. First of all, you're not going to have enough time, and it's probably not worth the effort. That changes your strategy because you need to somehow still do your research, right? If the interview is 3 days later, you don't have enough time to learn, Google Cloud, but the very least you can do is create a table, right? The first column is, the key AWS services, and then you just need to Google and find the corresponding, service names in Google Cloud, right? So Google Cloud Storage is probably S3 in AWS, EC2, and what's the service in Google Cloud? EMR for Hadoop and Spark, what's the service, in Google Cloud, right? So when people ask you like, oh, do you know Google Cloud or do you know like Google BigQuery, right? You can just tell them, oh, I haven't worked with Google BigQuery, but I have worked with a similar service in AWS, which is Redshift, right? That's and you can tell them that and then so the signal here is that, oh, I don't know Google Cloud, but I can pick it up in 2 days, and you can just send me to a training. Because working on warehouse, the platform itself is not the most important thing. It's the data modeling, it's the SQL, right? It's the understanding of the data that's more important, right? So don't feel like scared if you don't know some tools, because people know, like experienced hiring manager know that tools are always just tools. You can always learn, but the foundational skills are important, right? You can know many tools, but you can't code well, then you're not a good data engineer. So at least like when you answer these interview questions, you need to be prepared, right? So BigQuery is like Redshift or Snowflake. Maybe you have Snowflake experience. So whatever they ask you, you say, oh, I don't know this, but I know a similar tool in AWS, and AWS is my strength. And I think it's just going to cost me a few days to learn and pick up these new tools because I can learn really quickly. So you just sort of just turn your disadvantage into an advantage, right? So And that takes some courage and research and preparation, right? Okay. You know, and for example, you know, this is just one, but of course, you know, not everyone's going to be active on LinkedIn. I'm not that active, so you won't find any feeds, activities. But you know, this director also liked, right, another job posting, right? Then you're sort of like wearing your detective hat, and you can tell that, okay, looks like they internally use MS SQL. They have stored procedures, ETL. It's not her team, but it's like a neighbor, whatever neighboring team. So, so collect as much information as possible. You don't have to learn MS SQL, but you know, just know a little bit about the difference between MS SQL and maybe you have learned Postgres, right? And that's good enough. Like, I don't think they expect you to be expert in MS SQL. To be honest, it's just SQL. So unless they're looking for someone who's specialized in database optimization, then the database engine, you know, matters. And companies don't really, sometimes if it's a contracting job, they just want to hire someone who can do the work right away. They don't want to wait for you to get familiar with it. So those are more specialized role, right? But I think most of the data engineering jobs out there, you know, it's not that specialized. Like, you know, it's so, and sometimes you can just tell right away by reading the job description. They will tell you like how important some skills are. But most of those are more generic. Like if they, you know, they will tell you like Spark is nice to have, right? So they may still ask you Spark optimization questions, but it's not like if you don't know Spark, you're not going to get the job, right? So you need to really, when you read a job description, you need to know what are the important things on they're asking for, and this is actually something that you can ask the HR in the first round as well. Just try to have a conversation and say, hey, you know, if I happen to move on to the next round, like what are some of the important things you think I should be preparing, right? Because, you know, on the job posting, you guys ask for so many different things. Is there focus I can, you know, is there something I can focus on? I know a lot of these tools, but, you know, if you can help give me some directions or pointers, that will help me prepare better. I don't think there's anything wrong to ask this kind of questions. And sometimes they will be able to tell you, but sometimes maybe the HR doesn't really know the details, or they're just not technical enough, but you should be trying. You should definitely give it a try, right? And try to probe and, you know, collect as much, you know, useful information as possible, okay? Yeah, that's pretty much it. And then, after we've collected all of these useful information and also based on the job description, I think you need to come up with a list of interview questions so that you can do preparation. I highly recommend you write it down or type it out, so that it's more structured. This is something I suggest you ask your mentor as well. Right. So based on the evidence I've collected, you know, this director, I mentioned like agile, segmentation, predictive modeling. Then try your best to come up with some questions so you can do some practice and get feedback from your mentor. Right? You need to do this kind of preparation, but of course there are always generic questions you can prepare. Right. And they mentioned cloud. Right. So they may ask you like, how much do you know about? Have you worked with Google Cloud before? Right. Then you need to be prepared to answer things like, yeah, I haven't worked direct, I don't have direct experience, but I know AWS really well. And I know the similar services in AWS side, right? And they may ask you like, why do you choose S3 and Redshift over some other, you know, storage systems? But yeah, just get prepared. And preparation is, you know, is the most important step in job search. Okay.